My salutations, Internet. I bid you welcome to interactive media speculative conjecture based on extrapolated empirical evidence. Hollow Knight is a Kickstarter-funded Metroidvania game released in February of 2017 by Team Cherry. In it, you'll play as an insect who must explore the depths of Hallownest to uncover its mysterious past and save it from an enigmatic evil force. The game features a grand total of 44 diverse and interesting characters who you can encounter along your travels, but of these characters, one stands high above the rest. His past is clouded with mystery, and his unmatched beauty and vigor make him, without any debate, the fan-favorite character in the game. As I'm sure you've already guessed, I'm referring to Zote the Mighty, a knight of great renown, recognized even outside of Hollow Knight's community as a nominee in many Waifu of the Year award ceremonies. And the game's only been out 1 year. Now, at a glance, Zote may appear to be a simple, delusional character, but in reality, he is Team Cherry's perfect work of art, their masterpiece, if you will. Beneath the surface, Zote the Mighty is a powerful, resolute individual. His mysterious past reeks of an epic tragedy that may hold the answers to the dark, perplexing history of Hallownest. Zote is initially found in Greenpath, resting in the mandibles of an enormous mosquito. If the player chooses to defeat the powerful mosquito, which I should note is often considered the most difficult fight in the entire game, Zote will claim you stole his prey, and that he could have escaped with ease. However, if the player chooses not to save Zote at that crucial moment, he'll later be found dead. If this happens, you'll obviously not encounter him again, drastically lowering the quality of the game. Does this mean Zote's claims were false? Is he not truly a knight of great renown? To answer this, we must dig deep into his past. Zote's past is, of course, heavily debated in the community, but really, the debate only exists because the Hollow Knight community does not consist entirely of theorists as brilliant as myself. A common theory is that Zote is a creature born of void and darkness, just like the player. But does this idea really hold any ground? Or is he merely a surviving insect from the past kingdom of Hallownest? When the player meets Zote in Dirtmouth and he is struck with the dream nail, he reveals a piece of dialogue. This dreary place, it reminds me of home. This implies his birthplace was a dark, gloomy place, similar to Dirtmouth. This has led some to speculate he was born in the Abyss, so he is a sibling, a creature of void. This theory can quite easily be debunked, as siblings do not have personalities nor mouths. And if they did, could they really be as elegant as Zote? But if Zote is an insect of Hallownest, why does he speak of his home as if it were a distant land? This has led me to believe he is actually from a land beyond the treacherous borders of Hallownest. This would of course explain why he is first encountered in Greenbath, right beneath the entrance to Hallownest via the Howling Cliffs. But where outside of Hallownest could he possibly come from? First, let's look at his appearance. Zote has a similar appearance to the player, but a few extra features give him an edge in beauty. Aside from his cape being a magnitude more stylish, our eyes are immediately drawn to his horns. One of them is much larger than the other. Was one sliced in half in the midst of an epic battle? Well, no, there's no slice mark. And could you really imagine the elegant Zote taking any real permanent damage? Instead, the reason behind the missing horn can be found by realizing that all the characters are insects, and Zote is based off of a rhinoceros beetle. Once this connection is made, the resemblance is obvious. The second piece of evidence is a detail brought up in the game in the form of his legendary wooden nail, Lifeender, which he claimed to have crafted and named himself. Lastly, let's look at his eyes. Zote looks depressed and tired. He is the only character in the game to have eyes like this. From these three details, it is possible to determine exactly where Zote comes from. Let me break it down. Zote was born in Japan. This can be concluded because, firstly, rhinoceros beetles are exclusively found in Japan. Also, according to Google, wooden nails, the Lifeender, are actually commonly made in Japan. Finally, Zote looks tired and depressed from Japan's 12-hour workdays and their dangerously high suicide rates. Further evidence can be found in Zote's 14th precept, Respect Your Superiors, a very common philosophy across Asia. Furthermore, this becomes increasingly obvious when you realize Zote is the only character in the game whose name can be spelled exclusively with traditional Japanese letters. Coincidence? I think not. So, why is this important? First of all, we can actually work out a major piece of information regarding the history of the game. Hollow Knight is set in either the late 19th or early 20th century. We can tell this by asking ourselves the question, why does Zote carry a wooden blade? It's because he was trained during the Meiji period, which began in 1968, a time where samurai were banned from carrying swords, in an attempt to end the class system. Obviously, Zote just switched out his sword for a wooden one, so he wouldn't be targeted by the government. Alright, so Zote was born in the Meiji period of Japan, and he sought to learn the way of the samurai. This makes enough sense. But who really was he? Well, before we answer this, we need to discuss his lineage, and before we do that, we need to discuss the metaphysical essence of Hollow Knight. There are three essences in Hollow Knight: Soul, Void, and Dreams. Dreams are irrelevant for now, so I'll be focusing on Soul and Void. Soul is literally the living essence of all creatures. It is released when enemies take damage. It also supposedly can be used to craft magical items. The mask the player wears is used to contain the Void body in a physical form. When the player takes damage, it is actually the mask breaking and not the player dying. Soul can be used to repair the mask, and also the player's soul vessel, which is made of the same material, suggesting they are both made of soul or soul-infused material. Void itself is a living creature. It is a jumble of violent, goopy creatures with no personality. These creatures, like the player, can only become calmed and sentient with the help of soul, e.g. the mask, or light created from soul, suggesting the two essences are meant to be brought together. But are the essences ever mixed in the game? Are there any characters with a gray mixture of the two? The answer, surprisingly, is yes, and it's a lot more obvious than you would think. Grey Prince Zote, a powerful boss found in the dreams of Breda who shares a resemblance to Zote the Mighty. Other than the name, what suggests the prince has powers of both soul and void? Well, when he is defeated, he will explode in darkness, exactly like the Collector, who is confirmed to be exclusively made of void. However, unlike the Collector, he releases soul when he's hit. When he sends out his minions, the Zotelings, they are clearly made of void, except have masks containing soul, just like siblings. Zote is also the only creature in the game to just literally create minions. Fluke worms can spit out babies, but this is because they are hermaphrodites, and mother aspids are obviously giving birth as well. Zote, on the other hand, creates them out of void and soul manually, as well as showing properties of void, darkness, while being called the Grey Prince. So are the Prince and Zote the same person? No. And let me show you why. The hint is in their horns. Notice that when Zote faces left, his big horn is on the left, and when he faces right, his big horn is also on the right. Grey Prince is completely the opposite. When he faces right, his big horn is left, and when he faces left, his big horn is right. This is consistent with both of their appearances all throughout the game, so it is likely intentional. So who is Great Prince Zote? He's obviously related to Zote. The answer to this is that he is Zote's father. This can be pieced together because of their striking resemblance, and because Zote's father is actually mentioned throughout the game.
Araku 1,000 more. Will that be enough, father?
This dialogue is an enormous piece of evidence actually suggesting that Zote really was once an extremely powerful character in Hollow Knight. But Zote clearly isn't a samurai working for his father anymore. Why did he leave? Well, it's clear Zote and his father weren't in a healthy relationship. Zote's precept doesn't attempt to hide this, as it suggests the Grey Prince was jealous of Zote's natural talents in combat. Zote's Colosseum dialogue hints Zote was originally unaware of his father's jealousy, and instead formed an inferiority complex, causing him to go to great lengths to gain acknowledgement. Ironically, he made his father even more jealous. Truly a tragic dynamic. Zote must have eventually come to this realization if he were to have mentioned it in his precepts. What a realization it must have been. The man he had idolized and seeked approval of was actually jealous scum, whom he had surpassed long ago. Whether Zote chose to vanquish or abandon his father, we cannot know. Either way, Precept 22 makes it clear he left his home, giving up all his dreams of defeating the shogunate. Or should I say, his father's dreams of defeating the shogunate. Zote distinguished these dreams as a final act of severing his father from his life. Zote then traveled the entire world, as described in his 46th precept. Perhaps he was seeking the meaning to it all. Why did his father betray him? Did he do the right thing by taking revenge on his father? Could he truly be forgiven for all the lives he had taken? These questions eventually led him to Hallownest, or should I say, the moon. Now I hear what you're all saying, my fellow queerists. But VertPert, where's your evidence? And boy do I have some evidence for you. To start us off, I want to examine the player's jump height. As shown in this diagram, the knight is capable of jumping 5 times its own height. The largest standstill jump ever recorded was by Australian Darren Jackson in 2011, who jumped a whopping 148 centimeters. Comparing this with his height of 178 centimeters, he jumped 0.83 times his own height. Now, the moon's gravity exerts a downward acceleration of 1.63 meters per second squared. The Earth, on the other hand, has gravity of 9.8 meters per second squared, meaning in theory you should be able to jump 6.02 times higher on the moon. So how high could Darren jump in theory if he were on the moon? 5 times his own height. Sound familiar? Further evidence can be found by looking at Hallownest's surface. It's pretty moony, isn't it? But the question still remains, how and why did Zote get from here to here? The answer once again lies in the vast archive of knowledge, Zote's 57 precepts. Zote explains his reasoning to go to the moon in his 18th precept, seek truth in darkness. Put more simply, this means what you do not know cannot be learned where you have already been. Zote had already explored the ends of the earth. The only remaining place to find answers was in the darkness. The moon. As to how he got there, let me be blunt. Zote jumped from the earth to the moon. Zote has been described to have been able to kill thousands of fighters. He also must have wielded both void and soul to surpass his father. Still, as powerful as he was, jumping to the moon would still be impossible, right? It defies all laws of physics. That's where Zote's 40th precept comes in. Obey no law but your own. In a truly poetic fashion, Zote defies all expectation and limitations of what he is told he can and cannot do. He uses the raw, chaotic strength of void, controls it with the power of soul, blasting himself through the atmosphere like a rocket. But alas, Zote's poem does not only speak of triumph, but tragedy. Zote is not shown having any powers of void throughout the game, so it is likely they were expelled from his body during impact. With the balance of void and soul in his body destroyed, Zote was left with a surplus amount of soul in his body. As we've seen in the Soul Sanctum, having too much soul leads to insanity. Zote was left as a shell of his former self, unable to differentiate the past from the present. He still believed he was a famous warrior traveling the earth, which deluded him into thinking he could defeat foes he simply couldn't. Zote's story is a tale of ambition, of betrayal, of introspection and adventure, of overcoming your limits when the odds are against you, and of tragedy. Zote teaches us to question who we trust and admire, to create our own dreams, and not to follow the path of others, to go where we want to go, seek what we want to seek, and finally his tragic end teaches us the cruel nature of the cosmos. Nobody is invincible. Everything must come to an end. Eventually, you will crumble under your own power, and it will all happen in an instant. The passage of time will leave you helpless. As I'm sure you've already noticed, my perceptive queerists, Zote was named after a bar of soap. Look how much it costs. Because Zote soap is so f***ing expensive, it can be determined Team Cherry have crafted an elaborate metaphor depicting Zote's value as a character, not just within the game, but within the history of literature as a whole. However, I suggest you recall that's just a speculative conjecture based on extrapolated empirical evidence. An interactive media speculative conjecture based on extrapolated empirical evidence. Thanks for viewing.